All right, welcome to today's webinar. And so the initial people on here, if you can turn your camera on, it would be much appreciated. I know sometimes you're eating lunch. We don't mind if you're stuffing your face while you go ahead and do this. And sometimes you got other things going on in the background, but as much as possible, we definitely want to be talking with you. And we also make our webinars interactive. So the more that we can be interactive and we can have uh, questions. We want those questions coming up in the chat. And we also want you to unmute yourself in asking those questions as well. So we've got Nellie there, we got Jacob there. And, if, I get it, there are some reasons why you might not necessarily want to do this, but please do go through this. Dr. Gary Rademacher has scaled a number of practices. He's running 4 or 5 businesses now, and he's made multi-million-dollar practices and then sold those. So he's going to go through a lot of what has been successful for him and a lot of what the Business Academy does that's very successful for that. We want to make sure that we've answered all the questions. We've gone through a lot with that, and that you can see how much this is a fit for you or not. And that's the purpose of our webinars. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Dr. Gary.
Thanks, Quentin. All right, guys. So Jacob Nelly, as Quentin was saying, if you can turn your cameras on, that'd be great. I'd like to have a conversation with you guys so I can really, deliver what you're looking for. Like, because when we're talking about scaling your practice and, you know, um, there's different roadblocks to scaling a practice, and so, not everyone's the same. Maybe some people, need help with getting new patients. They may need systems for treatment. It needs systems for leads or lead management, but whatever that might be, or sales training. There's a lot that goes into scaling a business, and so I'd like to tailor this to you guys. And if you can communicate, that'd be great. You'll get a lot more out of this. So if you can turn your cameras on or use your chat box, that'd be fantastic. Um, Frank, welcome to the webinar. I think your audio is coming on. But hey, Frank, how you doing? Welcome to the webinar. We're just getting started here. If you can turn your camera on, that would be great. Nelly, thank you. Nelly, you look really familiar to me. Have we talked before?
I'm not sure if we have.
Yeah, maybe do you get told that a lot? Like you have
Familiar face?
familiar face, yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay. Well, welcome. Thanks, Frank. Thanks for turning your camera on. I like to engage. And the reason I like to engage guys is because, there's different roadblocks, and different barriers that people have in practice. And, I'm going to go over a lot of stories. And, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think the big thing is that, we learn from our mistakes and we learn from, just putting ourselves out there. But I want to go over just a tool today that you can use to scale your practice, and then go from there. And so I'll be asking specific questions so that you get the most out of this. Okay. So first off, just to let you know that when you join this webinar, you get 2 hours of free practice analysis, and so you're going to want to use this so you can scan that code. Um, the benefit of this is that when I go through this information today, you're going to be like, wow, I want to actually talk about my specific office, because like I said, everyone's different, in what those stops can be when you're getting your practice going. So the first question I always like to ask is, how much money do you spend on becoming a provider? I mean, for me, I spent $80,000. I'm definitely aging myself right now. I spent 85,000 ish to get to school. But here's what really was the kicker for me. I claimed forbearance on though I worked for someone else for a year and a half as an associate, and I claimed forbearance on those loans. And back then they were really high interest rates. So my loan went from 85,000 to 126,000 in 2 years. And so it's that was what I spent. But you know, what out of curiosity, are you guys, I mean, right now, gosh, there's students coming out at 300,000 plus in debt, just, learning how to be a a provider. And my next question always is how much money did you spend on being a business? I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but you guys have been in business for a long time. It's well before you got your license. I always joke about this, but the reality is that we all have been in business since the day we were born. It's called your social security number. It's a tax ID number, right? You're a cog in the wheel. And one of the biggest things that I see with many practice owners is that there's not a lot of investment in learning how to be a business, and that's a game that is it really helped me a lot. For myself, I had a really tough time. My break point, by the way, was I was not doing well in my report of findings process. I was seeing around 100 visits a week after 10 years in practice, and I was not doing well. I had like a 35% conversion rate, and I was hurting in that area. And then I remember years ago, Dynamic Chiropractic used to have a magazine that or a newspaper that was mailed out. Nellie or Frank, do you guys remember getting that? Did you ever get the newspaper? Yeah. So I remember opening that up and a goldenrod piece of paper just fell out of it. And I picked it up and it said highest evers. And it was highest evers in like new patients, in collections, production, and in there it was like conversions, like 80-90% conversion rates. And these were very successful offices all over the country. And that really caught my eye because I've always wanted to help as many people as I possibly could. I got into chiropractic because of how it helped my mom. Did you guys get into chiropractic because of like a personal reason, like a family member or yourself, maybe you benefited from it? Yay, nay? No?
Yeah, I got
Nelly?
into it for mostly personal reasons. And my uncle, not my uncle, my dad's cousin was a chiropractor. So had a little bit of a
Yeah.
family connection.
Yeah. My mom used to get these intractable headaches, and I remember like I was 8-ish, I'd come home from school and she'd be in her room, the door would be shut and all the lights be turned off. And when I came home like that, I knew you just don't mess with her, right? And she was an RN and she used to give herself Demerol injections. That's how bad they were. And back then, goes back to the 70s. She was giving herself her own injections. And so one day I came home from school and I remember she was laying on the kitchen table and the guy up the street, I didn't know at the time he was a DO, but he was more had more philosophy, right? He adjusted, manipulated, however, but he did more hands-on work, and he started working on her, and I just remember him, yanking on her neck, and kind of was a little bit worried there, for her. But she started getting better after that, and it changed our family's life, and so I applied to chiropractic school when I was 14. I didn't know I had to actually go to undergrad. I was like, what do you mean I got to go to undergrad? I was a freshman in high school, and I was applying, and but I've had this conviction and motivation to help people for a long time. And so when I was having 3 out of 10 people leave because I'm not closing people on care, it was painful. Not only that was I not helping people like I wanted to, I wasn't providing for my family that way I wanted to. And so when I saw that in Dynamic Chiropractic, I was like, I'm going to check this out. And it was the Business Academy, and I went and I spent some money to learn how to communicate and do an effective report of findings. And when I came back, my closing rate went to 80%. So it was life changing for me. And I'll show you how it affected me in the organizing board I'm going to go over, because it created a lot of good stuff, but it created a lot of problems. Because all of a sudden I'm starting 8 people a week on care instead of 3. And so you can see if I was on, once I started onboarding that many people regularly every week, I'd be in a report of findings and I'd have my door knocked on by staff saying, hey, you got 10 patients that you need to treat. And so, I scaled from 100 visits a week to 600 visits a week in about 2 years. But what happened was because it exposed me, like when I started adding patients, it exposed my weaknesses. of other areas I needed to work on. And one of the things is I didn't know how to run a business. And so I started taking the executive courses. And that was my journey, and to where eventually, to what Quentin said, and this, I'm not saying this to impress you guys. I'm just saying this is how it changed my life. Like that one decision, which I always say there, everyone's like one decision away. That was one decision for me that um, it changed my life. I've had multiple practices. I started, training companies. I implemented the systems that the Business Academy taught me, and eventually I became a partner with that because I wanted to give back. I wanted to help. And so that's who I am. But I spent some money in learning how to be a business, and it was at that moment that I was able to serve more people because I had better systems. Okay. So I want to show you a tool, and one of the tools that I want to show you here is just this organizing board. It's a living and breathing thing, right? And so, if we look at this is how we organize the flows and the command lines of an organization. So if you look at all the way on the left, you see division 7. It's just our executive division. If you're the owner and you run the office, you're in that area. But you manage and establish the practice. You do financial planning out there. There's a lot of other things you do in there, but this is the basics. Um, there's the communications division, which is your human resources, your front desk, et cetera, et cetera. Division 2 is your enrollment. This is your consultations, exams, report of findings, re-exams. Division 3 is treasury, so that'd be your billing department, payroll, AR, AP, inventory. Division 4 is your treatment. If you're hands-on working with the patient, you're in that. That's that division. Quality control is handling upset staff, upset patients, and then there's marketing, which is your division 6. Now, the first question I like to ask is how many divisions are you in? So if you take a look at that, if you are the owner and you are the executive director, you're in that 7th division, right? You're in a division. If you ever answer the phones, hire, fire, anything on the communication lines, a printer breaks down, you're working on the printer, what have you, you're in that area. If you're doing anything of the enrollment, if you are, doing the consultations, the exams, the report of findings, you're in that area. Treasury, if you do anything with like billing insurance or collecting money from a patient or doing payroll, etc., you're in that area. Division 4 is, you know, is your treatment. So if you're adjusting patients, you're in that area, right? Treating patients. And in Division 5 is your quality control. If you have an upset patient or upset staff, you're handling those cycles and training. Marketing, if you're doing anything in the marketing area, you're in that area. If you're doing SEO, if you're doing optimization, if you're doing anything on your website, if you're doing any Facebook ads, or if you go out and do events, if you go out and do lunch and learns or dinner talks, you're in that area. So the question I have is for you guys, how many divisions are you in? Is it like for me, I was in all 7 for the first, 5 years of my practice. And then as time went on, I um, as time went on, I had an issue here where I had to scale. I had to get help, or I had to buy time, which was hiring employees. And so, right now, Nelly, when you look at that, how many divisions would you say that you're in? I'm sorry, raise your hand again.
7. All 7.
Thanks. 7. I've been there. You know what this is? Frank, how many divisions are you in?
I'm in 6.
6. Okay. So I want you to what I want you to realize right now is that ceiling of your growth, there's this invisible ceiling that's over us when we're in all these divisions. Because what happens is, how many of you feel like you could be a really good fireman? You're going from one issue to another. And see, what happens is whatever you put your attention on will get better. But while you're putting your attention on something over here, something else happens in a different area of the organization, right? And so it feels like you're on this roller coaster. The things are getting up, they're getting better, boom, then you have a problem. It goes up and down. Does that sound familiar to you guys at all? It's frustrating. You know, I've been there a lot of times. And so I want you to understand there's three types of employees in an organization. It does not matter what type of organization, you know, that you have. There's a founder and the dreamer, which when you start a business, you're all three of these, by the way. Founder, dreamer, like you guys had a dream of opening up a practice or being a chiropractor, healthcare provider. You have you're your managers, like you're running the office, and then you're a technician. So when you're treating a patient, you're being a technician. And so really what happens if you're wearing all three hats, you know, you're going to have scaling problems. You know, you're going to hit that glass ceiling that you don't see a lot. And what we've learned at the Business Academy is that, you know, to in essence get the ball rolling, you know, you got to remove one of those hats at some point in time to scale. And many of our clients, they just, you know, they want to be a technician. There's like, I just want to take care of patients. And it's great, take care of patients, but like you got to help, we got to train your managers up to manage the organization, right? And so it's that's very important, you know. You got to have managers on the lines. And so you know, many of our clients, they just want to be the founder dreamer. They want to be on the board of directors. They're not treating patients anymore. They want to open multiple practices. And so, you know, they have a management team that is trained by the Business Academy and it allows them to scale. Okay. And so, you know, what we need to get working on is a couple definitions here. So phase one just means when an executive single hands while he trains his staff. So if you're in 6 to 7 divisions, you're doing a lot of the work yourself, right? And as you scale, we want to get to phase two, where this is where an executive gets people to get the work done. And as you're scaling, you're able to see more people and you put more organization in, and you can start to, you know, grow this thing here, right? And that happens through staff training. You know, if you're not training, you will not get to phase two, you know. And one of the biggest issues I had, guys, was I was told when I got out of school is keep a very low overhead. And so in my mind, I was like, well, staffing costs the most money. So I didn't hire anyone for the longest time because I didn't want my overhead to be high. However, it limited my growth. Can you guys see that? Like, you know, to do anything like great, right? To really impact your community and help as many people as you possibly can, you're going to have some people to help you at some point in time. You know, it doesn't have to be massive, but it all comes down to what your goals and what your dreams are, right? We help you with that. So now an org board that I just went over with you, I'm going to review it a little bit more, but the org board really it lays out responsibility. It's important that you know that you have everything getting done in your office and that you have people who are on statistics or metrics and they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. It's a flow chart that shows how things flow through the practice. And to expand, you got to get hats off. Like if you know, Nelly being in all 7 and Frank being in 6. Um, you know, I've lived that for 10 years and it's a lot. Like I remember not taking vacations ever. If I took a vacation, it was a 4-day weekend was my vacation. Because if I left the office didn't produce or make any income. And so I had this problem. Did you two have this issue? Like when I was in the practice, I was dreaming of vacation. And then when I went on vacation, I was thinking about all the stuff I wasn't getting done at the office, right? I wasn't present time, right? And that's a tough place to be. And so our purpose is to show you a path of, hey, it doesn't have to be this way if you don't want it to be this way. So if we look at this org board again, anything that's not expressed on your organizing board is going to wrap itself around the owner's neck. Okay. And so the top 3, whether you call it a barrier, a break point, a stop, a problem, however you want to label it, the top 3 are number 1 is, I'm going to go over these 3 and I want to hear from you guys. 1 is getting new patients in, just, you know, not getting, you know, the lack of new patients. 2 is the inability to convert them onto your recommended care plans. And 3 is this organization itself. any one of these 6 divisions can be the third one, which is just a lack of systems, standard operating procedures. Whether it's, maybe you don't have a standard operating procedure in your sales. Maybe you don't have a standard operating procedure in marketing, or maybe you don't have an SOP in how you even treat patients, right? So these are things that we help people develop. Now, Nellie, when you look at this org board and you look at barriers, breakpoints, stops, problems, however you want to call it, what would you say your number one problem is right now for you?
New patients.
New patients. That's actually the most common, right? So yeah, I get that. Frank, what's yours?
I would say it's the organization of the office for sure, this
Organization.
chart here.
Yep. This is a great chart. I mean, I don't know if I have a picture of how it can look. Just to let you know, this is a living, breathing thing almost. Like you have your command lines and your communication lines built in this. When you get organized like this, it really takes a lot of pressure off. Like I'll liken it to this. Think of this. I'm going to tell you a story. How many of you guys have heard the story of Henry Ford back in like the 20s or 30s, and the Chicago Tribune wrote an article against him and how he wasn't that intelligent. They were very what's the word I'm looking for? Libelous. They were just basically saying that he shouldn't be running Ford Motor Company, and that he was basically unintelligent. And so it went to court, it went to trial, and at trial, the attorneys, the opposing attorneys, went to him and said they were asking him questions like, really off the wall questions like, hey, who's the president of Nigeria? And he's just like, I don't know. And they're asking him like worldly questions, and he didn't know any of the answers. And they said, see, he doesn't know what he's doing, or he doesn't know what he doesn't have information. He doesn't know anything. And then his attorney went up and asked him. They said, hey, Mr. Ford, so what do you do if someone did ask you this? What do you do? How do you get the answer? He's like, well, I've got like this board in front of me, and if I need to know, something about another country, I just push this button and it calls that person. And if I need to know this, I push this button and I call that person. And he literally just, like won the case based on him just showing like I have people that work for me that know these answers, these questions and the answers to these questions. And my point on this is like when this is in, as an example, when I was in the board of, when I was in the in the executive position, if there was a communication problem, I would be giving it to my communications manager. I never was fixing a printer or fixing it. Once I had built my office up to a certain point, if internet problem, they were handling it. If I had a report of findings problem, I went to I went to the person in that area that was doing it. Like if there was a patient issue or a staff issue, the quality control was handling it. It got to the point where I learned how to be a master delegator, but I had a team that was helping me. That's what allowed me to actually scale the business to 600 visits and integrate and all that kind of fun stuff, right? So what we do here now, I want to give you some more information here. So every position in your practice needs a valuable final product. What that means is it's a product is someone or something that has been brought into existence. It's the end result of creation. So like examples of that, our front desk would be like the valuable final valuable meaning it's exchangeable. You are paying money to someone for them to give you a product. So the front desk is patients completing their care plan. You see, my front desk, their responsibility is whatever the patient signed up for. The front desk was very clear that your job is to make sure they get through their care plan. A case manager, they educate the patient, they get them signed up, paid, started on the plan. A biller is to complete bills collected from the insurance companies to enter the patient. And so what's important to understand, what I want to talk about here is exchange. There's 4 levels of exchange. I usually go into a long dissertation about this. I'm not going to do that, but the 4 levels of exchange are, exchange in abundance. Then there's normal exchange. There's, or I should say, fair exchange. Then there's poor exchange, and there's criminal exchange. What I always used to focus in on is that everyone in the office would be in type 4 exchange with the staff and with the community and with the patients. I was always looking at how do I create a wow factor every step of the way for a patient. So we had a lot of referrals because they never got that experience anywhere else. And so what this does is it helps to speed up the particle flow within your office. So what I mean by that is like a patient can be a particle, right? How quickly can I get that person through the organization? A file. How many of you have ever had this happen? You get to the report of findings and you can't find the file. Have you ever had that happen? Am I the only one? Frank, you're nodding your head, yeah. That would make me so upset. Like, patient comes in for the report of findings. I can't find the file. Worse than that is, or maybe not worse, but I get the file, but the benefits aren't, their benefits aren't, the plan of care is not done. The benefits haven't been checked. And so now I can't present to them any type of plan because I don't have all the paperwork completed. That's what I mean by like speedy particle flow. But well, we always want to be in really massive exchange with people. Now, if I go back to this org board on the bottom, you're going to see I added in a VFP line. So on your org board, you have valuable final products for every area, and you live by that, right? So in Division 7, when you have your executive hat on, your viable final product it's a viable expanding practice, a viable expanding practice. Month after month, you should see that your office is growing. It's not only viable, but it's expanding. If you look at universal laws, the universe, as an example, it's either expanding or contracting. It doesn't stay the same. There's no sameness. And in an organization never stays the same. It's either growing or dying. There is no staying the same. Even inflation, take inflation as an example. If you're seeing the same number of patients now than you were a couple years ago, I think Quentin, I heard you run the numbers on this. I think you had said that if you can chime in on this, because I think this is an important point. There's been massive inflation, right? So if your fees are still the same, you're making a lot less right now, and your money doesn't go nearly as far. What were those numbers, Quentin?
So over the last 4 years since 2020, inflation has gone up by 25%. So if you were charging $50 for an adjustment prior to COVID, ideally you're at 75 or at least $65 an adjustment now, just to pay what you were paying. Your staff don't want any less money. Of course, they want more money. Why? Because their groceries have gone up, the price of the pump's gone up, the rent's gone up. You're paying employees a lot more. Do you remember back just 5 years ago, you could pay an employee $15 an hour? I don't think any of us have an employee that's earning that much these days. So that's the basic idea there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's anyway, I think that's really important to understand that, there's always change, and we got to be, continually working on our systems, and focusing on growth. Another example of your valuable final product would be like in your Division 4, it's patients getting the maximum chiropractic improvement, or whatever you're doing, because there's different things like, so, I don't know if you're straight chiropractic or maybe you do functional medicine or regenerative medicine or what have you. There's all kinds of different, neuropathy, there's all kinds of different things, but it's really getting the maximum results. Your quality control would be like a corrected organization, right? You're making sure that all the systems are in and they flow. A valuable final product in marketing would be an abundant qualified new patients who are interested in your services. Okay, we have a whole marketing system, by the way, that a whole marketing system that we recommend to have 10 different marketing flows to continue to always bring in new patients. So it's a because if one thing turns off, you don't want that to kill you. Like I remember being in Colorado, I had 2 practices in Colorado, and in 2003, the state laws changed for PI practices, and for those offices that were strictly personal injury, they either had to completely pivot and shift, or they moved. They closed down and they moved to another state that was more friendly towards that type of practice. COVID was another one. Like if you're getting patients, like for instance, if you were going out and doing events and doing like screenings or health fairs, all of a sudden you couldn't go to any businesses. Like if you were putting all your eggs in that one basket, you had to pivot and shift quickly, right? So so now here are some example systems that you got to have, right? Like what's your dream? What's your dream? Your dream needs to have a system. Like what's your manifesto? Like what is your what's your purpose? And you need to look at that consistently. What's your systems for marketing? What's your system for getting leads? How do you manage those leads? It takes 5 to 8 contacts just to get someone started on your services. Um, what's your sales process like? Your report of findings process like? Which that's a system. Money system, scaling, all this stuff requires systems, right? So that's what we focus on. We focus on creating really fantastic systems so that you can scale your practice. And then we want to manage the practice by statistics, because I want you to write this down if you're taking notes. People lie, like stats do not lie, people do. Stats do not lie, people do. And you guys may have experienced this before. Have any of you guys had an employee before that's telling you one thing, but when you actually look at their production, it's different? Have you ever had that before? I have. I mean, it's not fun. Not fun. Glad that you haven't had that, Frank. Yeah, it's not fun.
I've only
Go
not
ahead.
had it because I don't hold people to this sort of standard where they have a product to give me. That's the problem.
Well, yeah,
I should be
yeah,
doing that.
I hear you. I've been there too. Like I practiced for 10 years before having any of this stuff, and it was a game changer for me. And I'm not gonna, okay, please don't take this the wrong way, guys. I'm not saying this to impress you guys at all. But me putting money into learning how to be a business created a $4.5 million business year in and year out. That was one office. That was one business. And it wouldn't have happened unless I made a decision to learn how to be a business. It started with just wanting to learn how to communicate better with people so that I can get them started on care. And it was never about the money. That was seeing a lot of people. I was calculating it a while ago. We were seeing 600 visits a week, but then when I medically integrated, it went higher for a long time, 15 years. And so it was we were able to help a lot of people, and that's what was always been my intention. So some statistics, Frank, that you want to be looking at, because the thing is here's what's great about statistics, by the way. When you're doing statistics, you can predict the future, right? You can predict the future. If you're not operating your office with statistics, that's when you have like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, what happened there? You know, like, but when you're monitoring, when you see things happening on statistics, you can see how things are going, and you'll catch something before it becomes a problem, because we train you how to look at a stat and how to look at a graph and know, hey, I got a problem here coming. I mean, if you could predict your future, would you want to some degree in your business? That's key. Like when you're managing by statistics, I know when I got a problem in an area, and I manage by statistics. As an example, I'll go through an office, and let's say I'll go through my marketing department and I'll look at their statistics, and if they're below quota, I'll say, hey, what can I do to help you? What are we running into? And I can help them. If I go into my case management, my sales department, and they're above quota, I'll give them a high five and say, hey, you're doing a great job. Well done. Need anything? But literally I'm in and out of there like that, because they're above quota. They're nailing it. Like I know where to put attention to help, scale my business. Okay. Um, some example of statistics. I got sidetracked, but like enrollment, patients started on care, finance, collections, treatment, patients completing treatment plans, marketing new patients in, net profits, and cash over bills for an executive, right? And so on the bottom of this org board, you're going to see another line where you put your statistics on, right? You put your statistics on. That's key. That's key. So you manage by statistics, and you want your team operating off of a valuable final product, because you're exchanging payroll, goodwill, you're exchanging a good culture for them to be in, right? It's not always about the money, but yeah. So, anyway. So I just wanted to give you an idea, just looking at statistics. Like when we look at statistics, for instance, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but really, like looking at a graph, if something is steeply down or it's not a lot, we call that non-existence. If from one week to the next you go down steeply, it's called a danger. And there are very specific steps of doing this that has to be done to revert that. If it's slightly down, you have, 5 steps where you write up and you look at it and go, this is what I need to do. Okay. If I keep looking at this, if it's slightly up, it's normal. If it goes up steeply, it's an affluence. Regardless, each one of those conditions, you do something different as far as what you need to do, right? And so I would have meetings with my team off of statistics, and I'd be able to put a roadmap together for them of what they need to do to get their stats up. It's powerful. It's so powerful. And the team loved it because if you're writing things down, I want you to write this down. Production is the basis of morale. Production is the basis of morale. Have you guys ever had this situation where, like, okay, Frank, I'm going to pick on you. Frank, are you married? Yeah. Have you ever had this situation? Has your wife ever given you a honey-do list on Friday and you got the whole weekend to get it done? And let's say on Saturday you bust it out and you're done by noon. How do you feel?
Feel good.
Feel good, right? And then let's say the next weekend you get the honey-do list and it's Sunday night, 8 p.m. comes and you haven't hardly done anything. How do you feel?
Stressed.
Stressed, right? Production's the basis of morale. And it's the same thing for you, Frank, Nelly. It's the same thing for you. It's the same thing for your staff. It is a duty and an obligation to help people get productive because they'll feel better and you create a better environment. Are you guys with me on that? Like it's infectious. I'm really excited for you guys because so far, is this making sense to you too? Totally making sense, right? Okay. Because this is a game changer. You're one decision away. I'm telling you, so power, by the way, when you see this graph, when you see a high ranges for a long period of time and you see a lot of white space under the graph, that's called power. And that's our goal, is to get you in power in every area of your organization. It's not judged on a 1 week basis only, nor by a single line on the graph. Power is normal trend maintained in a high range. Thus, a power condition must be determined by more than a week's worth of statistics. And our goal is to get you into power. And you need to have systems with standard operating procedures for every division that is monitored via statistics. Okay. So we really groove in this organization for you. And Nelly, you may need to start with getting new patients, and that's where you start. And Frank, we might be looking at this organization first. Everyone onboards with us differently based on what their needs are. And the one thing that makes us different than any other consultant out there is we're a training company. Now, the reason I think this is important, when you learn how to be a business, you have the knowledge and no one can ever take that away from you. So guess what? You become not only, have you ever heard the statement, be your own best friend? So what happens is when you learn how to run a business, right, you'll never need a consultant again. Okay. Maybe some things here and there, but it's a whole different game because you can think with this technology and make decisions and not second guess yourself. So I want you to hear from one of our clients real quickly. So, I think he has a great stories.
We started off seeing 30 people a week. We're seeing 1,000 people a week now. We're serving more of our community. Dr. Brian Dahmer, owner of Family Chiropractic Center for Wellness. I was that chiropractor that worked 5 years and never took a vacation. I can't imagine stepping away from my practice for more than a week. TBA has not only allowed me to become phase 2, I'm not in my practice anymore. I could take a vacation for 2 months now if I wanted to. And I've never had that kind of freedom. I have people coming up saying, oh, I go to your office, and I've never met them. It's nice to hear they got a great experience in my office, got a great adjustment, they're referring people, and I never stepped foot in that office. Management, having good leaders, having people that could run the show when I'm not there. We put the systems in place, the org board in place. It gives you just a clear vision on where you want to go and how to expand in the future. I joined 7th Division, which is a group of incredible individuals doing things above and beyond at a high level. I love masterminding with these people. I always walk away with best ideas and a nugget that I I go home and immediately implement. I chose TBA just because I needed that structure. With 4 offices, if you don't have systems that are repeatable and staff aren't accountable and managed properly, it all comes crashing down. You can't have a personality-driven practice. You have to have something people can plug into, buy into, and grow. It's just the vision that you put out that you want to create, and you just keep expanding it and making it bigger. I can only impact so many people with my own 2 hands, you know, but as you teach and as you inspire your team, man, it's amazing what you can do. I'm excited to be a part of the group, and I can't wait for more to come.
All right. Yeah. Dr. Dahmer. Can you guys hear me still? I've had some headphone issues today. Thanks. Dr. Dahmer's like just a great guy, just because one of the things he taught me is that the speed of decisions is what's made him successful. The speed at which he makes decisions. He has now 6 offices going on 10, basically. He's medically integrating one of his offices right now. He sees over 2,000 patients a week. And his system, and he just used these systems. And what he did is he trained his managers to run the show. So he's no longer treating patients, and he's scaling. He owns pickleball courts now, so he's got his hands on all these different things. And but that's one of the things I did learn from him was like, I remember at a mastermind, because we have masterminds, and I remember him saying, I think the biggest difference between me and other people that would like to be where he's at and they're not is like, I just make decisions fast. Speedy particle flow, even your mind, your thoughts, and how you make decisions. It was a big thing that I actually, learned from him. So in any case, that's my presentation, and I want to open it up for questions. Frank, do you have any specific questions for me right now?
Well, something that Dr. Dahmer just said that hit me is I feel like my practice right now is personality driven. So,
Mhm.
It makes me nervous about converting that personality practice to one with systems and a full team where I'm not in the mix every day.
Yeah, one of the things that happened to me, and I can completely comprehend that. I can tell you that here was my mentality, and let me see if this registers with you. When I was treating patients, I was the best. Like there was no one better than me. Do you feel that way? Like when you're treating patients, there's no one better. I was the best adjuster, and I was really good, right? Um, but one of the hardest things I had to do was when I decided to get associate doctors in, um, because I had that mentality, like there's no one better than me, right? And I had this epiphany after a while. There's 2 things that happened. Uh, One was it was the hardest thing to do, but the easiest. Once I made that decision, it's really easy to convert people onto other providers. But I remember walking down the street and running into a patient, and they didn't even know who I was. It was like they just want to get better, right? Whether it's by your hands or someone else's hands, but I understand that consideration completely. Um, I think that what it comes down for you, Frank, though, is like, what is your ideal scene? Like, what is your ideal scene in your practice? Like, who do you want to be?
Yeah, I want to be the CEO.
You want to be the CEO? Yeah. So, um, you're going to have to make some decisions, some different decisions. I want you guys to write this down. Be, do, have. Okay, write down be, do, have. You just said you want to be the executive, so that's a havingness, right? I want to be here. So if I take a chiropractor in one office and I put them in a different, if I take one chiropractor and they're seeing 100 visits a week and another chiropractor seeing 400 visits a week, right? And if I said, hey, I want you to flip for a month, and you flip these 2 chiros, the chiropractor that was seeing 100 visits goes into the 400 visits, and do you think their numbers are going to go up or down?
Down.
Exactly. And vice versa, if I take the person who's seeing 400 and I put them in the 100, what's going to happen? It's going to go
Gonna
up,
go up.
right? They have different beingnesses. See, Nellie and Frank, you guys have a beingness of a daughter or a son. If you're married, you have the beingness of being a spouse. If you are, have kids, you have the beingness of being a parent. You also have the beingness of being a chiropractor, and that beingness is, um, that beingness to me is the most important component behind it. The havingness. You may have to be someone different than you are now, and then do the steps that need to be done so you can have what you want to have. Be, do, have. I remember I met Tom Landry. He was the Dallas Cowboys coach back in the 70s and 80s, if you don't know who that is. And I was at a wedding in 1994-ish, 3 or 4. And I had the opportunity to sit down with them. And there's 2 things I remember with him. When he shook my hand disappeared. The guy had like a mitt of a hand, like huge hands. And then and I'm not small, like I got pretty big hands too, but it's like this guy, my hand disappeared. The second thing was I asked him, like, what made you such a successful coach? And he said, I made my players do what they didn't want to do so they could be who they wanted to be. And I think that the one thing that the Business Academy does, it's, once you map out the strategic plan, it's going to have a checklist of what needs to be done for you to be who you want to be. But there's some doingness that you have to do. And so how you change your beingness is through training and knowledge and then implementing it. Does that make sense? The person who's seeing 400 visits a week has more knowledge than the person seeing 100, right? And maybe they also have a different motivation and maybe different conviction. I have hired a lot of associates in my time, and the ones who always did really well, whether they started their own practice later on or they did really well in my office. I had an associate with me for 12 years. And they were seeing like 200-300 visits a week. But it's they had conviction and motivation. What's your conviction and motivation? Why do you do what you do? What's your purpose, right? And that's okay if it's not solid. It can get solid, and we can help you with that. But we want to get that be, do, have going. We want to get that being trained up, and then give you the steps to do so that you can have what you want to have, right? I know it sounds kind of simple, but that's the game that we're playing. Nelly, what's that? Just the same question for you.
Could you repeat the question?
Well, that's a good question too, because I forgot the question I asked Frank, because I went on a rant.
Was your question if we have questions?
It was if you had questions, but what did I ask you, Frank?
I think it was, what do you want, what do you want to be in the practice? What
yeah.
role?
Yeah, thank you, Frank. What do you want to do, Nelly?
I mean, my first step would be to not be doing all of the roles.
Yeah.
I'm in a transition in my practice. I'm buying out my partner. So there were a lot of changes going on.
I can help you with that. I've done that before. I had a partner for the first 10 years, and partnerships can be great. I have partnerships now that are great, but I've also been in partnerships that have not been good. And it's
I mean, we have a good relationship, but moving on is the right step. And it's just figuring out, everything that goes along with that process, and ultimately, starting to run the business the way that I have wanted to run the business. And just, then taking off hats, right? So I've got to wear all these hats, but then slowly take off one hat, one step at a time.
Yep. Yeah. That's the nice thing about doing the strategic call with Quentin, by the way, is you can have that conversation with him. Like, here's what's currently going on with me. Here's where I am. Here's my actual scene. Here's my ideal scene. And then what do I need to do to fill the gap? What do I need to do to get here? And he's helped thousands of offices. So basically he can actually sit down with you and go over, like, once he talks to you, like, hey, you want to look at this, this, and this, and he'll put an order together for you. And then if you guys choose to work with the Business Academy, great. If you don't, you're getting an education.